What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the beautiful St. Vitus basement, and this time we got this amazing backdrop, and we are here with Infinity Shred. Thank you all for being here.
Very happy to be here.
Hi.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. First question I want to ask you is, what the hell is this?
Damon.
So because Nate is busy doing sound, this is Nate for the rest of the interview, so any questions about guitar can go to him. But in actuality, this is a book cover turned into a beach towel from our favorite sci-fi erotica author named Chuck Tingle.
That is amazing. Why isn't this the album cover? That's what I want to know.
Well, he asked us to do a cover of a song on Twitter, and we are hoping he will be willing to do art for it so that we can put that out and have him do the whole package with us.
Okay. I guess it's fair to say I interviewed the entirety of Infinity Shred. There's always, every time I interview the entirety of the band, there is one member who doesn't say anything, so it won't make much of a difference. But it's so awesome to have you guys here. Forever a Fast Life is your newest record. It's scheduled to come out in August. Do you guys want to give a rundown on how the making of the record was?
Yeah. So let's see. So I guess I'll just talk about my angle, which was that I work professionally in classical music, and that's something that is like super contrasting to what we do as a band. And I joined in kind of later in the game. Damon started it out in the year 2012 and then I joined in later. So for this one, we had the chance to record some classical instruments like violin, viola, cello, like bigger kind of orchestra vibe. And so that was a really cool addition to this album. But let's see, what else?
Yeah. This has probably been like the weirdest album creation process we've ever had because it's actually the fastest we've ever written material. Like usually that just takes us a while, and we never really have like excess material just lying around that becomes B-sides. It's usually like we wrote 7 songs and that's an album now. This one and that'll usually take about like 2 years. And this time we just had it done in like half a year, but it just took us a really long time to figure out when and how to record it. So we were just like kind of painfully idling for a really long time figuring out when we could get it done.
Well, I've noticed from listening to a lot of the record already that like it is a very experimental record. I see like some heavier elements. There's a lot of like I guess shoegazy sort of elements and classical elements as well. It's fair to say you guys like to experiment with your sound, especially with every album, right? It's not like you want to necessarily pigeonhole yourselves, right?
Yeah, I think that's honestly like a thing. We've always just wanted to do whatever we felt like we could incorporate. Like we've always just felt like everything that we've made a part of it is really just like a part of ourselves sneaking into the music. But with said, that's also made it hard for us to figure out like where we fit in. Because in 2012, when we started this band, it was like the EDM boom, and a lot of people would see like, oh, they have synthesizers, they must be EDM, and we'd be like, everyone's going to be really sad if we play the EDM show. So we started calling ourselves Sad EDM for a while, just to like...
We've gotten cocktail metal.
Cocktail metal.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite genre that someone's ever described.
What was the
us
most
as.
recent one? Genty
Taiko.
Genty Taiko.
A Genty Boys Taiko.
Yeah.
On the periodic table of heavy metal subgenres, I think you guys are going to add like 20 more.
Yeah.
Well, I think
that's the goal.
I think a tour like with Astronoid is actually fairly appropriate. I feel like I call this style like you guys in Astronoid like dream metal, and I feel like you guys really do create an atmosphere with your sound. When it comes to having such an experimental style of music, is there ever something though that has to start off first? Like, do you have to focus your music around a rhythm, or do you have to focus your music around a riff, or does the making of each song just call for a new approach?
Historically, it's usually one of us will start like just literally like a 2-bar synth loop, and then sometimes it's been like, I'm stuck with that, I don't know what to do, and then I'll get back to that file an hour later and see that Nate has like written a full song around it. So it's usually just one person starts with one small idea. Clara can weigh in on this, but I'm kind of excited for us to try more approaches going forward because like we've never really started with a drum groove first, and I think things like that will lead to more like exciting and different things. But historically, it's been just someone writes a little bit of a loop and then someone else picks up and takes it from there.
Yeah, I also feel like we do a fair amount of like starting with moods rather than any like specific musical technique. So, and I've had situations before, like I write ambient music of my own that has nothing to do with the band stuff, but I've sent little snippets of things before to the band where it's like it doesn't necessarily end up being a song, but it's kind of a starting off point, and then we might be like, all right, well, let's like do something similar in that vein. So I feel like mood stuff is important for starting songs.
Of course. And you mentioned you have a background in classical music, and I was interviewing Tardia before, and being that she was a classically trained vocalist, and then she went on to sing to Nightwish, which is very different. Like, I was curious to how having a classical background maybe influenced how you approach this project.
Cool. Yeah. So one thing is that, I grew up listening to plenty of like heavier music, but never straight up like metal scene necessarily either. I switched to being serious about classical music pretty young. I think I was like 12 or so. And yeah, now I like do that for a living. So that's very, very much my headspace. And being in this band has really liberated like a lot of stuff that I kind of never had the chance to explore when I was younger. One of the most interesting comparisons is like how so much of classical music is about exactitude and not exactitude necessarily for exactitude's sake, but like for being able to do something really sick with it, being like, let's be really disciplined with this, and let's...
You slightly botch a note on violin, like there's
no
no matter how many people are behind you, people will hear it. So
no, it's really like, there's I could go into a whole rant of like why that's a problem in classical music too, but I do feel like that, to me that's been really attractive, at least like as a drummer, is just figuring out like really cool kind of like things that I've learned from playing, polyrhythms and things, I don't know, just like little techniques from classical music and then bringing it into the band. And yeah, I don't know.
Say one thing on that. One of the like most satisfying and both like fun things when Clara first joined the band, at least for me, was like every time like we had come up with a really like technically complicated drum part, Clara was like, okay, like first try. But the thing that like Clara hadn't done and is now so good at was just like playing like straightforward rock beats. So it's like fun to see how good Clara is at all of that now, but just like I don't think that was really a part of anything you got to do before.
No,
yeah.
No, it was totally just I have transferable skills, so let's try.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I had a discussion about this because a lot of people have maybe somewhat of an unfair assumption that like if you're classically trained, you're like very limited and it's this
Yeah.
way or the highway.
Totally.
But like I also feel like you don't want to be too liberating because then you'll be directionless. So like I feel like you guys have the best of both worlds where you have a sound that defines you guys without being repetitive, but you are also able to experiment without going completely out of place. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
can still tell it's Infinity.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from a like, I don't know if it's a real word, but I'll call it a trichotomy of the three of us, where like I've kind of intentionally stayed an idiot about like actual music knowledge because I really like how we play off of each other, like Clara having her classical background, Nate has a music technology background, and I really just always liked computers as a kid, so like I just have kind of like a machine background. But as far as like actual music, I still don't really know what I'm doing, but I think all of that like has just kept things really fresh constantly because I'll do things where Nate will say like, this chord change doesn't make any sense, but I like it. I'm just like, I don't know what makes sense, so I'm just gonna like keep going with it.
Yeah.
Totally. And actually it's been funny at times, like I feel like Nate is sort of the translator, like Nate, the silent translator. Like I've had times where I'm like, oh, I want it to do the thing where it's like whoosh, like that filter thing, and like they both know what it is, or like Nate will just say, oh yeah, add the high pass, whatever, and then and vice versa, where Damon will be like, oh, every other beat it should do this or something, and I'm like, oh yeah, it should be a syncopation, and so it's kind of, but Nate is kind of the in between for a lot of that stuff, so it works out pretty well.
And I have two more questions for you guys. What I've never seen you guys live before, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But I've always said, especially with bands that are very experimental, like a band like Dillinger Escape Plan, or I don't know, like you name it, like seeing a band so experimental is a completely different seeing them live versus on listening to them on the album. Do you guys try to execute the material exactly how people are going to hear it on the album live, or do you try to make the live presence like a little bit different and incorporate something people won't hear anywhere else?
It's always going to be different because we've never been a studio band per se. Like we don't get together in the studio and write things. We're mainly writing in our bedrooms. So like when we come back, when we like start practicing for tours, it's actually usually the first time we've ever played any of the material like together. So it's always ends up being a little different. But then we also have a lot of things like in this set that are intentionally very different from the recordings. Like one of our older songs we're playing How much faster is it?
Oh, I don't know how much, but every time I play it, I'm like, no, it's too fast.
Yeah. Do you want us to hold on this? Cool. Yeah, we're playing one of our old songs, Mapper, and we got the idea to play it live faster and pitched up because someone posted a video on Vine many years ago of them playing their record of it at 45 instead of 33. So we just changed it to be those specs. So like, there's a lot of things like that where like, especially with older material, we'll be like, we're kind of bored of like playing the same thing. Like, why don't we make it different? Like, write a new intro for it, change the key it's in, whatever. But I'd say whenever we're playing new material, we're always just trying to get it close to the album because it's the first time we're figuring it out as a live thing.
Okay.
And one other thing is that I think a lot of how we write is like it's a very crafted process, and it's something that we work on gradually, and detail oriented. And so I think for all of us, it's really nice to have an outlet to get away from that. So this is just a performative thing. It's not that it's like musically vastly different, but I think just like for me, the difference between like recording the songs, which is a very stressful, detail-oriented process, versus being able to play them live. Like, honestly, I'm not saying that the way we play them live is necessarily better, or at least in my case. I feel like I'm way more reckless, and I like make a lot of choices that aren't necessarily the best choice, but it's just like an emotive choice, which can be a good thing too, So there's more of that, I think, when we play live.
Of course, and like obviously when you're making the album, you want to get exactly what you're going for or as close to it as possible. But I guess so you have to be extra focused. There's also plenty of room to like mess up. Nobody will hear it. But live, there's like an organic element where you just want to incorporate that, and you're not going to experience elsewhere.
Yeah, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have a collective willingness to lean into messier things live, and that we all really like that aspect of it versus the recordings. But that's just never been how we approach it in the studio. But when we're out on stage, we're just like, sure, let's make a ton of noise and see what happens, and just like make it more fun for us to experience doing this all the time.
Yeah. You should totally troll your audience and just like play complete noise nobody's heard on the album, and like.
I mean, it could happen.
We haven't talked about it much yet, but there's going to be exclusive to the vinyl, like an extra 3 minutes of noise on one of the songs because it only worked to fit on its own side. So we just leaned in and we're just like, let's make Cranemaker 11 minutes instead of 8. So if you get it on vinyl, there's an extra 3 minutes of noise waiting for you.
Hey, you never know. Those extra 3 minutes could just end up being the biggest hit you guys ever had. So you never
Honestly.
know. And you led me to my next and final question, and I love asking artists this because I either get the most bland, like, I don't know, or like the deepest answer where it's going to be like, take this interview an hour long. How do you guys know when a song is done?
It's going to take a while. No, we were talking about this the other day. Well, actually, no, sorry. Can I at least readjust the question for me? I've been really interested in like how we end an album, because I think for us, the songs definitely stand alone, but we've always been really album driven, like album arc driven. So I think how to finish the album has been a huge thing we talk about, and we have sat on for weeks. And I decided that I have a formula right now. It's my formula. Either an album should end in this like beautiful, crafted, like we're finishing it, minutes long, like gradual end sort of thing, which is how we kind of finish this album, or it should be something that's like a complete, like weird, something completely different at the end. That's like, end credits or like a trailer for the next album or whatever. And whenever I hear that now in other albums, I'm like, sick. I love that. So those are the two things, and those are two things we've explored a bit.
Can you review albums for me from now on, please? Because you just said it so perfectly. Like.
But yeah, definitely the most crucial thing that Clara brought up is just like that we do tend to think of things in terms of the full album. So it's less that like there's been plenty of things we add on like last minute to on top of a done song that like could have just gone out as was. But then when we look at it in the context of the album, we're just like, maybe it just needs this little sound to thematically tie it to the one that's coming after. So usually we look at a full package of things before we ever consider anything completely done.
Okay. Knowing when to finish something, whether it's a painting or a song or a story, knowing when to end it just seems like the hardest part.
Totally. And I think that has to do with the whole phenomenon of like continuously adding, which is, I think, something we need because we all work separately and together, you know, so we all kind of add in our little like bits. But at a certain point, it's always a little stressful. We're like, should we not change this? And there are a few times where like I'd feel really good about a section to a song and then would wake up the next day and see that like up until 3 a.m. one of you was working on it and like turned it into a hip hop section, and I'm like, I don't know about that.
Why you gotta do that?
but then like, you know, then that grows on you, and then we're like, yeah, this is like the nature of collaboration, and it's what it is.
But yeah, there's just to put it in like context of our new album. There's one song on there that was mainly written by Nid and Clara called "What's Worth Hiding," and the end of that like totally just could have been like a rock fest, just like big pounding drums, just like super epic post rocky. And then like kind of towards the end of working on the album, we were just like, let's throw in another hip hop beat here to kind of like make the hip hop beat that's in this other song not feel so alone on this album.
There you go.
And it works.
There you go. As long as if it works. So before we go, I want to thank you guys so much for your time today. It's going to be an awesome show. Is there just anything else with Infinity Shred you would like to promote after this day with Astronoid? This will be uploaded by midnight, so anything that hasn't been announced yet, don't say it here.
Cool. No, just look out for our album, August 23rd. Very excited to be working with 3 Dot on it. All the boys in Periphery are just the sweetest people, and it's been a real pleasure to get to work with them. And I don't really know why they put so much trust in us, but we're very thankful for it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Anything for you?
No, thanks.
Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Everybody, Infinity Shred, Forever Up Ass Life,
Bye.
August 23rd. Pick that up, and we'll see you next time on Heavy New York.